Welcome back to the Context Coaching Podcast. We're joined today by Jeff Holloway, Athletic Director, Kent, Denver. Coach, thanks for jumping on today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, can you take us through your background and how you ended up in that chair, right? What were the steps along the way, the shifts, the pivots, coaching, not coaching? How'd you end up doing what you're doing now and became and landing in the administration chair that many of us don't jump into this business for?
Well, I was one of the weird kids that in third grade I knew I was going to be a football coach. I'm a fourth generation. Dating back, my great grandfather was a head football coach and athletic director at a public school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My grandfather coached in the NFL for over 40 years. And my dad was a college football coach and I think we'll call him an assistant athletic director, because he had to have two roles in Division III school. And he did that for over 35 years. So, for me, that's what I wanted to do from the jump. And, you think about third grade recess when we were playing touch football, I was trying to tell kids what to do and routes to run. And, again, it was weird back then, but, looking back at it, it was a fun journey. And as I progressed in my life, through high school and into college, big public school kid from outside of Columbus, Ohio. And, I thought everyone, just like everyone in Ohio, you would think you're going to be a Big Ten football player. And when that dream didn't happen for me, I went away to boarding school. And, I was like, I'm going to try and see if I can get some East Coast offers. And I was gone for about 3 weeks when I realized that, I didn't want to go to a big school and sit the bench for 3 years and, put on 30 pounds and live in a place I didn't want to live in. So I called my dad and I said, hey, after this prep school year, I'm going to come home and play for you. Um, which ended up being, a really fun thing for us. My mom died when I was young, so he was all I really had. So my brother went to another Division III school and played football, and my dad never got to see him play because he was working on Saturdays, right? So it was an opportunity for me to always have my dad, watching me play, which was really fun. And then as I progressed through that, we knew, the path of getting into this business, was, do I want to be a GA? Do I want to take the college route like he did? Or do I want to do high school? And, I'm a firm believer, that kids age, 14 to 17, 18, we have such a fundamental impact on their life. And I'm not saying college coaches don't, but, I just really believe the high school age kid is somebody that you can really transform. And so I decided, that and a few other factors, you looked at it, and that was back in the day when Joe Paterno was at Penn State and Bobby Bowden was at, Florida State, and there was a few other long-term head coaches, but everyone's career was 1, 2 years. And, I was dating now my wife, and it's like, did I want to be a GA at, Iowa State Central College, and then the next year move down to Texas and, take her through that journey. So I decided to get into the high school world. I coached and taught, actually one of the worst jobs you could have. I taught in an emotionally disturbed children's unit for 2 years, and I had kids assigned to me, and I got them off the bus and I put them back on the bus, and they were with me all day. It was terrible at the time. It was very hard, as a 23-year-old, to try and empathize with kids that were dealing with the things that they were dealing with. And coaching in high school. And, then I just, I had such a great experience in the boarding school world. I wanted to get back into that independent school situation. So I took a job down in Texas, as a PE teacher and head football coach. And, I went to my head of school, and, I was like, teach me about this. Like, how can I maximize my skills and or lack of skills and my lack of talents and my talents. Um, what's the journey? And he said, well, the journey for a person like you to both maximize what we think you're good at and also financially is to go get your master's in athletic administration, and start aiming to be an athletic director and head football coach. And as a poor kid from Columbus, Ohio, when your dad tells you what to do, you do it. And my boss told me what to do, so I did it. And it ended up being great. and, my wife and I started to have children. And the joke is my second child, Bo, was born August 17th, and I was the head football coach in Texas. And I tell people I didn't get to hold him until Christmas. Not a funny joke, but it was about right. So I wanted to be a family man and also be it at a high level. So we moved to boarding schools, and my wife got this, not, she didn't have to work, and she got to raise our kiddos, and it ended up being great. Went to two different boarding schools, and, got some associate athletic director experience, and, got to run the show for a little bit. And it was awesome. And at my last job, we never thought we were going to leave. And then Ken Denver called me and said, would you be interested in looking at this? And one of the negative factors is the next athletic director at Ken Denver was not going to be a coach. And that really was a hard choice for me because I was going to lose at the time I felt I was going to lose out on the relationships with those kids. And also, people often ask, do I miss it? And, I miss the stuff that I wouldn't have thought I missed. I missed getting on the board on the weekends and, devising the plan. And, I miss obviously the locker room with the kids, and, but sitting where I get to sit, I get to be, I think, try to be really good at my job and be holistic. And, when I'm in those admissions conversations, I don't have football only on the brain. I get to look at, what is the best interest of the school. I do miss the relationships with the kids, right? That's why we do this. And I get to be an advisor here, which is awesome. So I have 11 advisees, and, that's my time with the kids, and I get to see them compete every afternoon. And, after year 4, I'm starting to break into getting to know the kids and the families better. And so, that's the web as to how I got here.
Love that. And there's so many things I want to talk about, so I'm going to try to stay on task here. But number one, because the impetus of this show is to create this digital database of mentorship, I want to dive into going to a completely new school as an outsider, as the head of program, and what that's like, and what you learned through that process, like right away, that you realize, hell, I need to figure this out, right? Even if you had associate experience or elevated from within your current school, right? It's a different beast than coming in from the outside, right? And almost parachuting in to take on, everything that's going on, both good and bad. So I'd love to know, right? You're in year 4, right? So we're almost at this cycle where you're halfway through graduating whatever culture was there before you got there. But I'd love to know some nuggets for people that maybe are going to find themselves in that situation, right? Like, here are the things I needed to figure out really quickly. Here's some of the successes. Here's some of the challenges. But that's kind of what I'm curious about, Coach.
Yeah, and I'll answer that in two ways. In the first way, I've replaced a guy that was at the institution for over 40 years. So the athletic department suite is named after him, right? So, and there was no buffer. I didn't replace the guy that replaced the guy. So, coming in, you have that innate, never follow a legend, right? That's what you hear coaches say. And, he did amazing things for the school, and anybody who's willing to give 40 years of their life to an institution, you got to just, in education, I think you got to value that. So I had to immediately overcome that this isn't going to be the same that it's always been, but it worked really well. And one of the things that attracted me to Kent Denver was the trains ran on time. When you're looking at some of these athletic director openings, when you're able to peel the onion back a little bit, there's some dumpster fires out there. And, there's reasons that these jobs are open. And I'm not saying that's universal, right? Like, people are great all the time, but, and is it an institutional problem? Is it a resource problem? Or is it the person, that wasn't able to establish their culture, if you will? So overcoming that, which I still haven't overcome, and I'm not going to be here 40 years. I'm not trying to match that. So I think that that's one really important factor. The other factor is my time of arrival. I bought my house in Denver on FaceTime because of COVID. So I came from, the boarding school that the tagline of the boarding school is the family boarding school. I mean, I come home from work and there'd be students wrestling with my kids, on the floor, eating pizza on my patio. That was the kind of environment. And then I immediately shifted to COVID, where certain sections of kids weren't even allowed in the building because of the way that we had to navigate the cohorts, right? We had the colored cohorts, and so it was illegal, maybe not the best word, but it was illegal for kids to come to my office because we were a color-free zone. So we couldn't even have kids. So I was completely isolated from the community as a new member, and it was no one's fault. It was COVID's fault. So that was tough for me. Like, I'm giving up boarding school, I'm giving up coaching to come here and sit in my office by myself with a great team of, we have 4 assistant athletic directors here, Kent, and one of which has been here for over 20 years. One had been over a decade. I hired one new one, and one had been here for 3 or 4 years. So a nice little cascade of years of service to the institution. But what was really good that came out of that was we had to work together and collaborate on everything that we did. It wasn't Jeff coming in here and saying, this is how we're going to do the locker rooms, or this is how we're doing uniforms. Like, you remember how do you get the kids into the locker room and out of the locker room safely, right? So we were able to completely and totally collaborate on everything from schedule, transportation officials, all of it, because you had to. And it was because of the way society was at the time. So that's obviously not a normal response, and that doesn't help us with our mentorship. But looking back, it was, and again, not making light of the deaths and people that are very sick and all of that, but looking back, that was it was a good thing for our department, because we got to collaborate and get to know each other, and it was not Jeff's way, or I'm telling you how to do it. We're doing it together.
No, for sure. And I think a lot of groups were able to experience a similar uh, take, right? And how do you navigate this thing, and how do you deal with the things beyond our control and make sure that we're keeping kids at the center of the equation? And so the fact that you had 2 members, right, that had been there for a long time, or 3 actually, or one that was
Great, yeah.
shorter term, right? But that probably was valuable as well, right? So you could get the lay of the land, even though you're not really getting the lay of the land. So,
Yep.
all right, let me follow up with this then. What have you, I guess, implemented that you brought with you from elsewhere? Obviously, right, it's got to adjust to fit Kent Denver, but things that were concepts that maybe didn't exist there that you feel have helped, and maybe what are some things you've stopped doing since you've gotten there because you found a better way?
Um, you know, uh, and again, shockingly, I'm going to answer it in 2 ways. Um, the first way is 2 years before I arrived, they did an audit of the athletic department. So I was handed, kind of the playbook of what we're doing really well and where are some of our challenges. And um, if I could go back and look at that document, there were 23 recommendations for the athletic department, and some of them were really low hanging fruit, how you handle cash at the concession, things like that. But some of them were the 40,000-foot view. So because of COVID, I had this playbook when I was at my old job that I was able to kind of prepare for what I thought we could do, not knowing the culture of the community. So I was able to implement off of stuff that was already shared with me. And I'm a firm believer in an attract them in and attract them out model, right? We're an independent school sitting in Denver, Colorado. We attract all students to Kent Denver, whether you're an athlete or not. So when we're attracting athletes, particularly, we have to be able to showcase what we can offer, get our coaches involved, and also get them on campus. Once we have accomplished that, now we need to get them to apply, enroll, and all of that kind of fun stuff too. Once we have that, we don't just stop, right? Because I want to attract you in, and I want to help attract you out. And if we're doing a good job, those kids are going to matriculate and play college sports. And that's if they so choose and if they work, but we have to be the ones that are prepared to help them through that process. So I implemented, we have somebody on our team that is the admissions liaison and the college liaison. So, she meets with those different constituencies every other week. And we're making sure that if the kid goes in and says, I want to play football at Michigan, but doesn't start for us, our college office is going to know that. And we're going to take that information from college and we're going to work with our coaches to make sure that we're all on the same page. And a lot of our sports here are club sports, right? So you're playing for your club coach who tells you that you're going to go to Michigan. So what we try and do is, when we're working with the families, we are working with the club coach, right? We want to include their voice in our process, because at the end of the day, our college office needs to have the most information to help get our families to the right places. And I think, I always say this, that independent schools collectively don't do a great job of celebrating how great our college offices are. And, when I'm attracting kids to Kent Denver, the fact that I can say to a family, we have 4 people that is their full-time job is to help get your child to college, right? And, you're going to start working with that person at the end of your freshman year, and we're going to get all of this stuff in line, and the athletic department and the college office is going to be hand in hand with that. Just as important is we have to be in line with our admissions, right? And again, as I mentioned earlier, when you're not just football on the brain and you're thinking collectively, and coming up that the numbers are going to be a little bit light in this sport, or we have 2 goalies in the senior class for soccer, we got to be able to attract a soccer goalie. And so we put those sheets together, and when we're working with admissions, we get to be thoughtful, and we get to spend time on, these are the kids. Now we got to yield them, right? We got to get them, to come to our place. And so, if you build it, they will come isn't always the answer. So, but those are things that we've implemented since I've been here. And I think those have been very well received. We did a college celebration, and another thing that I brought with us is we do 3 college celebrations at Kent Denver. We do the early action, right? The NLI at the very beginning. Then we do the December signing as well. And what we have found at Kent is, because so many of our student athletes are going ED. So if you're going ED to a NESCAC school, and you get in, you're technically committed to them. So now we can celebrate these awesome Division III schools along with any NLIs that might have popped in that window. And then we do one at the end of the year. And the end of the year, we have a beautiful field out here. And, we throw some tables up. We invite all of the kids. We invite all of the parents. And I stand up, do a little spiel, and we get pictures. And it's a really fun way to celebrate these athletes. And this past year, we have a little over 100 kids. I think we're like 130 in our senior class, and we had 24 kids committed to play at the next level. So those celebrations and finding opportunities to have, a catered luncheon for those kids, I think is a cool thing, to be a part of. One thing we implemented that I brought from a former institution, we have this coach development plan, right? The coach development plan, why do you coach the way you coach, all of those questions. And then I need to know, what is your vision and mission in your program, right? So we talk about the vision and the mission. And then, if you could have anything that you wanted, what is your strategic plan throughout that? Like, I'm sitting at dinner with a family that's really interested and excited about your sport. I can say to them, well, actually, our coach doesn't want new uniforms. They actually were really looking to try and get, we're currently right now for our field hockey program, I'm trying to buy one of those $25,000 donkeys, right? So, because we need a new score table, so if our coach was interested in that, I can use our coach's voice to say, hey, we really want a donkey. That's something that we're looking at. And then I want them to invite me to a practice. And then I want them to invite a peer coach. Anybody, doesn't even have to coach their sport, somebody that they know, trust, and respect. And they invite them to practice, and they tell me what they want me to watch. Hey, Jeff, go over there and watch my assistant coaches, or we're doing this drill. What do you think about this drill? And after the practice, I'm able to give them immediate feedback on what they are interested in learning about themselves at the time. And then I also have them ask me to come to a game. What do you want me to watch during the game? And one of our coaches, I always think is funny, she said, I want you to sit near the parents and tell me what the parents are saying. And I thought that was really interesting. Now I wait 48 hours before I give them that feedback, because in game is different than practice, right? Stakes are a little bit higher. And then we revisit those things. I have a matrix of how many years of service. I don't ask you to do that every single year. So it's, after year one, after year two, after year four, so on and so forth. And that's something that I think has helped us. That's the 40,000 foot, version of the coach development plan. And then we have one that I call the state of the sport. And state of the sport is your in the weeds, end of the year, exit interview, type stuff. We survey our players, and then we tease out the results. The coaches don't see the surveys. We tease out the results and we provide them with the scores and with some of the things that that the kids had to say or the players had to say. And then we talk about what does your roster need, then all the other stuff. What does your roster need? Do you have any special dates that you're going to miss because of a wedding that so we can schedule around it? Important stuff that I need to know that I can help build out the budget. And then we use those as we meet. I use that as my archive.
No, that's awesome. And off the recording, we're gonna need to talk more about that and have you share some of that with me. But I want to pivot back to football now for a variety of reasons. But I want to know about Texas football and how it compares to your experience in other places. More for me, but also for the listeners, because you have, at least I do, right? This perception, and I use it all the time when I talk about playing football here. It's like, hey, it's not Texas football. Like, you're gonna be okay, right?
Yeah.
So, but what does that actually mean? So I'm curious about that experience, and then I have a follow up after you shed some light on that.
So I'll start with I was at a private day school in Texas. So the way that Texas does the way they do their divisions is UIL, which is the public school that oversees, it's the organization that oversees all public school sports, right? So you have UIL, and then you have what's called TAPS. And this is when I was there, could have changed. So when I was there, and then they have TAPS, and that's the private and parochial schools. And then there was another league called the Southwest Preparatory Conference, and that's what we were in. So we were in the Southwest Preparatory Conference that was similar, like-minded schools all over. So there's a bunch in Dallas, Austin, Houston, one in San Antonio, and we actually had two in Oklahoma. So we split into divisions and figured it all out. My experience with Texas high school football was that everything that you think is pretty close to true. The difference in our league is we had a bunch of a bunch of dads that went to big public schools and had that Texas high school public school experience, but then sent their kid to private school, and they wanted to try and make that private school experience the same as their public school experience. So it was Friday Night Lights, but it wasn't 10,000, and I'll never forget, I was at a board meeting with our league, and one of the principals said, why are we playing 7:30 on a Friday night? Like, can't we move it? And one of the guys stood up and said, because it's football and it's Texas. And we moved directly on from why we play at 7:30. That's all that needed to be said. So it was a fun experience, and the schools really valued football, right? They were important to the institutions because we were in Texas, and we could, the rule in the UIL is that all coaches have to be members of the community. So you had to work in some capacity for the school. In private schools, we didn't have that. So I was able to get guys, I think I had 3 former pro football players on my staff because they had other jobs, but they still loved football and they were able to come and coach for us. And, so it was really, and I was young, and I was a believer that I was just going to outwork everybody. And all I did was watch film all night, and, I'm going to beat you on the board every day. But I quickly learned, that you had to have the horses to win. And it's not about players. It's not about coaches. It's about the players.
What's the cliche? It's not about X's and O's. It's about Jimmys and Joes.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so the reason I wanted to ask that is because I would say at most institutions, and I don't know what it's like at Kent Denver, the private school world in Colorado, but out here, the tail wags the dog in regards to football in at the league level, and I would say even down to the site level where it matters culturally, right? Having 11-man football. And so with private schools specifically, right? And you worked in East Coast boarding schools. A lot of them play 8-man. But I don't know if you saw, but Campbell Hall, which is a school down in Los Angeles area, decided to drop their football program recently, and they're an independent day school. And I'm very curious how that is going to impact them, bigger picture, not just, hey, we don't have football anymore, but right from an admission standpoint, from kids that they traditionally would have gotten but might not now because they don't have it. Talk a little bit about how football impacts the culture there, what you've seen over the course of your career, and how you would navigate a potential decision like that if numbers weren't where they needed to be, and your thoughts on the ripple effect that comes from making that type of decision.
Yeah, I will tell you, the gentleman that I spoke about at the beginning of the conversation, he was our football coach, and he's the winningest football coach in Colorado history, right? So, doing as long as he had been doing it, the culture, and when he left, something that I was really proud of to be able to attract our next football coach was the football culture at Kent Denver was really good, and it was really supported and really positive, and it wasn't like football here and then everything else here. It just football was a part of Kent Denver, and it was really and still is. Like, we had, I think, 8 seniors join the football team that had never played football before because they wanted to have a good time. And the parents in that community, it just is. It is a good feel. Now, success helps, right? We were 9-0 in the regular season this year, but so that's really important. And it's interesting because I would say our peer school, independent school in Denver does not have football. And we do. So that I find fascinating. And Colorado in general, right, is we're more outdoors. We're more, you got the hiking and the skiing and all of that stuff. And so I was curious to see what the level of commitment, but when you go into communities around Colorado, that they still value the Friday Night Lights experience, and it's an important thing for their community. And something that's interesting is there's more football in Colorado than any other sport. So we are a small football school, so that we don't play in football. We play a completely different schedule than we play in any other sport. So we'll tell you, like lacrosse, we're 5A. We're the biggest division in Colorado. So we're playing schools right around us, the large public schools. Well, football, we're 2A. So we'll go to a town like Elizabeth, Colorado, that's a small, more rural mountain town. And there's fireworks at halftime, and it's the smell of the hot dogs, and it's the band on the field. So I love that our kids get to experience that, because in the spring they're playing at the Stutler Bowl, which is Cherry Creek, which is the biggest high school in the state of Colorado. And, so it's like they get to experience all different kinds of things at Kent, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that's super helpful in regards to how I was trying to process this, because I've said, as the questions have come up over time, it's like, hey, would you ever go 8-man? I'm like, nope, absolutely not. Not unless like we had no other option, because the trickle effect it has on everything else, right? Because football is, I would say, unique in that it is probably the last sport that is not playing year round. And even the 7-on-7 that's popped up, it's not like the demands you have in volleyball or softball or basketball, right? So those kids get to go play other sports, and it's like they're going to, right? That's what their coaches expect. And we rely on those kids to be on all the other rosters. And so if you now cut that subsection out of your population, right, similar to your competitor, let's say, I'm sure that impacts their other athletes and their other sports. But we don't need to dwell on that. I want to go back to this other thing you said. You were going to be the first AD at this school that wasn't going to be allowed to coach. Now, I philosophically believe there's merit in that. I'm trying to get myself to a place where I am not coaching, simply because of, even at the low hangingest area, the optics aren't great, right? In regards to you might do everything perfectly, but because you're the basketball coach, they're getting privileged, right? So talk a little bit about the institution's decision to implement that. Talk about where you are at with it now versus when you first kind of thought about it, and just your thoughts on that in general.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, the athletic director not being a coach came from the audit. and it came from the audit because of the words that you just said. He was a football coach, and I wasn't here, but everything was equal. But because he was the football coach, football got privilege, right? So they wanted to set the next person up that it wasn't going to be like that. When I philosophically believe you and I are on the same page that, the optics aren't good when you are coaching and also the athletic director. And I'm also a believer that you can love basketball more than you can love other sports, but that doesn't mean you're treating them any differently. And you can know that, and as a professional, you can know that, but the perception doesn't lie. Fundamentally, I like the idea of athletic directors being coaches because you are right there with the coaches. You're spending the 2 hours in the afternoon at practice. You're on the bus on the way home. You're spending the late hours. You're watching the film. And so you have that commonality with the coaches that you're, trying to mentor and trying, like, you're not willing to do it, right? Like, you're not coaching. You're not out here coaching. You don't know what it's like being with these kids on, this day. And, in Colorado, we've canceled the last 2 weekends. We've canceled baseball games because of snow. And it's like, for me, it's just a simple phone call. And the baseball coach is beating himself up because now he's got to change his arms, do all of his different rotations. So that, has always, since I've been in administration for, over 10 years now, that idea of getting my hands dirty with you has always been there. The idea of not coaching because of the perception has always been there. And uh, this business, and I like to say any business, is all about the people. And if you've got the right people, then it should work. And so I can tell you unequivocally, I'm a better husband and a better father. you know, on those Saturday afternoons, I'm not beating myself up because I should have thrown it and I ran it. I'm present at my children's things and I'm not thinking about practice. And like, as I told you about Bo, was born in August, and I made the joke to my wife. We were going to go on a scrimmage a few days before he was born, and I wrote down our athletic trainer's phone number, and I said, all right, if you need to go to the hospital, you call this person, and they'll be right there. I'll get there after the scrimmage.
Yep, some of those choices that we get put in and we'd like to have back. I've got a couple of those, but it's neither here nor there. The
Uh-huh.
other thing I would say on that, because I think we are philosophically aligned on it, I enjoy coaching, and it's not that I don't want to. It's ultimately I feel like an absentee parent with my soccer programs because it's the same season. And ultimately, this year, our basketball season ended a little bit earlier than normal and our soccer season extended. So I was finally able to be out there. And it just made me feel even more like, wow, what would it be like if I could give them the same attention that the other sports get that aren't in the winter? And so I have that I carry with me a little bit more so. I mean, the optics also, but it's more that too. Like how are you present for the other sports when you're coaching in the same season? And that's what I wrestle with. Let me go to this. What is something that you have gleaned watching other programs and even watching those within your own umbrella at Kent that you would say, hey, this person's elite at this, and I would offer this to anybody regardless of sport? As I'm always curious where people tend to get tunnel vision that, hey, I'm a basketball coach, I need to go watch more basketball. But I think there's so many opportunities to watch your peers coach that have nothing to do with your sport that you could then implement.
I when I first moved to Texas and got into the independent day school, I before kids, I did the basketball clock, and I did it for the money. But looking back, I would watch coaches. I was right there front row, and I got to see what was going on the floor. So I knew what the moment was, and I would often try and gravitate to the people who I thought were really good, and having the way that their kids would respond to them. So at the basketball clock, I would listen to the timeouts, all of the transition, the way that they would talk to the kids, when you were subbing them in and subbing them out, and so I I like to think I learned a lot from a lot of different coaches that didn't coach my sport. But again, it always goes back to the good people. And what I like to say is that when you have the coach that when something doesn't go well in a game and your players don't turn to you, they turn to each other, that's the magic. And because what you have instilled in your players is they are the leaders, they are responsible. And there's two different kinds of sports, right? There's the players run sport, and then there's a coaches ran sport. So it's going to be a little bit different. But when stuff gets hard, what do we do? How do we react? And if every one of us turns and looks at the coach, I don't believe we've done the right thing, because we haven't empowered our players to be able to come together, rally up, make a plan, and then go after it. And that, to me, that's the magic and success. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's what I often think about. And you know, we've been beat by coaches that we're better than because their players are better than our players. But what I ask of all of our coaches, three really, really I think impactful things here. I ask you to over communicate, and you need to over communicate with the parents. You need to over communicate with the kids. And nobody's ever said, "Hey, Jeff, you send me too many emails," or, "Hey, Jeff, I know too much of what's going on. I know how to be on time too often." Right. So over communicate, build transformational relationships with our kids. And if you have to end practice 15 minutes early, end practice 15 minutes early to get to know somebody, because I want their experience at Kent Denver and wherever I am. I want them to look back at their high school playing experience. That was the most fun I ever had. And X sport, right? It doesn't matter. I had so much fun playing basketball, and I can't wait to go back to campus to see coach. And those are the special things. And then build your culture. And I don't come from a place of believing that it's the Kent Denver athletic culture, right? It is culture within sport, because I want your experience, excellent experience, right? But I want your experience, like I just talked about with football, that's a different experience than you're going to have with boys lax, right? So I want that. You got to be able to build your culture, and those are the three major things that we talk about with our coaches. And if you can execute those three things, success is going to come, and wins are going to come, and but it's all about relationships.
And even if the wins don't come, if you have the culture right, the kids still have that memory, right? And I
Of
think
course.
that's ultimately what you're after when you mention transformational relationships and culture. And culture is a big buzzword and it's hard to define, but you know when your coaches have it right and when there's areas that you can help maybe shore some things up. But your win-loss record is going to be what it is for the most part based on your talent that you have in the room on any given year, but your culture can always be good, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I think gets missed unintentionally most of the time, but because you're so far in the weeds trying to be better at the product that it gets missed. But I appreciate that you said that. What would you say that you could offer then that are kind of overarching culture things that maybe they're specific to the sport you coach, maybe they're not, but that people can implement that can have a transformational effect that's tangible, right? I don't want the ethereal,
Yep.
deal, team building. Like, no, but like, what are some things that maybe you've done that you could offer?
What I try and do is, make special experiences for the kids, and it's whether, at my old job, we would go to, we'd go to a minor league baseball game, right? And give the kids $10 and they get to buy the hot dog and a soda. And, but it just, making those special experiences that are off the court and that are off the field, I think that is culture. And if you have a group, whether it's 15 basketball players or 50 football players, if you have a group that wants to do things together outside, and you don't have the freshmen sitting with the freshmen and the seniors sitting with the seniors, if you are a group of individuals that are all together making those special experiences, that is the difference. And we always go back to that magic word of time, right? When do we have the time to do this, Jeff? I'm playing two sports. I got club practice. I also have 4 hours of homework, all of these things. And now you want me to go to a ball game, so we need to be thoughtful and strategic in our community about what that means. But, if I were to give advice to people, it's to make the time to do special experiences with your kids. And if you have to take, again, I said it earlier, if you have to take a little bit of your practice time, it's worth it. it is worth it because you're going to be stronger bonded. And when stuff gets hard, they're going to look to each other and not look to you.
No, and I think that's such a simple recipe in the way in which you shared that, because we talk all the time that culture is built in the van, right, in the bus, and when you're traveling places. And I think what you just said is the off the field, the off the court, the special experiences, whatever they may be. It might be like, hey, we're going on a hike today. Like, we're not going to go in the gym. Those are the things that resonate, right? And obviously, if you have an outlier year and you win some championships, fine. But for all intents and purposes, like that's not what they're remembering 20 years from now. So I love that you go
Cross
ahead.
country or distance runners, excuse me, in track. He just texted me and said, "Hey, can I have a little bit of money to take him out for ice cream? We're gonna go for a jog. We're gonna run by the ice cream place." I'm like, that to me is a no-brainer. You
Yep,
know, like those kids are gonna go crazy. It's 70 and sunny and beautiful. They're gonna go crazy. And you know, those coaches want to do that. And that, you know, I always say yes.
for sure. And I think those are also the things that I wonder how far to, I guess, impose myself on my coaches when I don't see them being creative, right? And so, what are your thoughts on that? Where, right, you may have a coach who's super creative and comes up with these things to do, and then you have others that you know that's just not in their wheelhouse. What are your thoughts on how to help those coaches figure it out?
That's part of the building your culture conversation. Right? And what are you doing to build your culture? Give me some examples of, you know, what is the Ken Denver soccer culture right now, and are we having positive experiences? And so if you can define it, right, and you can tell me what you're doing to build it, then we're going to be there, and then we can start brainstorming on ideas on how to make it better, and you know so that would be my advice for you there. And we always have to have purpose in the why, right? Purpose in the why. And back when I was coaching football, you know, why did you run that play? If my answer isn't because they were in cover two and we scouted that, if that is not my answer, then I shouldn't have been running that play. You know, I have to know what I'm doing. And you know, again, goes back to those crazy young days. I would say of the three phases of the game, I know what all 33 people, what foot they should step with on any given situation. And you know, that you got to know the purpose and the why.
Those details are always fascinating. My colleague that coached baseball at Jesuit in Sacramento would talk about right, left, shuffle, shuffle. It's
Mhm.
like when you're taking your lead, and it's just like, okay, that's extra details that I would not have thought about as a baseball coach. But okay, you've mentioned this audit a couple times. How was that done? Who did it? How can other schools implement something similar?
It was done before my time. So, and I don't remember the name, but um, you can, what I have had more success with, instead of spending a bunch of money, and this is just my lowly opinion, instead of spending a bunch of money and having people that don't know your community and don't know what you're trying to get, call three or four people that you know that are in this business and have them come hang. I did one at St. Mary's Hall in San Antonio, Texas 2 years ago. The head of school there was the associate head at one of my jobs. And he called me and he said, "Hey, I need you to come down here and tell me what we're doing great and what we're not, what are some of our challenges." And so I met with him and I got some ideas on what his vision was. And then I was able to walk with the athletic director and learn about everything, the facilities, how they handle coaches, you know, where they want to go, where they've been, and then offer my 2 cents back. Like, this is what I witnessed. This is what I saw. This is, you know, you want kids in the weight room, but you don't have weights in there, you know, things like that. And so that was really, really helpful because when, and it, within the audit that we had, you know, there were some things, like I mentioned, like how we handle cash from the concessions, you know, like that's not helping me, man. Like, you know, so give me some tangible things that we can really get after and that we can help. And when you have somebody who's passionate about athletics and somebody who's passionate about kids, bringing them through your building and doing school visits, I think I've had the most success. And I love just going to your school. You know, like we'll be on vacation and I'll say, "Hey, you know, you know, I'm in California. I'm going to go." And I did it at Harvard Westlake and Viewpoint 2 years ago, right? Just went out and visited them and spent a half day with them. And the takeaways that I still talk about some of those things.
Yeah, no doubt. I did that when I was in Hawaii for my daughter's volleyball tournament in the 8th grade. I called up Punahou and
Right.
Yolani, and I went and met the ADs and spent the afternoon on campus, try to figure out those things. And I think that is such an underutilized tool for coaches, ADs, administrators in general, right? And it goes back to the time issue. I don't have time. But hell, like when you're going somewhere, like there's schools everywhere. If that
That's right.
matters to you, you can reach out and scratch an itch and try to figure out how to do some things.
And defining professional development for our coaches. What does that mean?
Mhm.
You know, and professional development to me doesn't mean you go to a conference for a week and listen to all these speakers and, you know, some of the greats, right? But to me, I want to take the DU hockey coach out for lunch, right? Like he just won a national championship. I'd love to spend 30 minutes with him. That's not football. That's, you know, like, you know, see what he's doing. And I tell our coaches all the time, you find somebody that you want to go have lunch with, send me the receipt. You know, if you're a reader, go get books. If you want to watch the movies or whatever you want to do, however you define yourself as professional development and how you're going to gain the most from it, I'll pay for the school trip and, you know, within reason. I'm not flying to Hawaii, but you know, like that to me, defining that for them and knowing that they have that support and growth, because as schools, I think we do an amazing job, right? Professional development is smacked on everything that we do. You know, that is highly important. And I'll completely pivot if that's okay. And something that we haven't talked about at Kent Denver, that I would be remiss, is the way that we handle wellness. The way that we handle wellness at Kent Denver, I believe is first in class. And I will tell you that, not only because I work here, but because I was never going to leave the job that I had. And when I interviewed here, I was able to look at it as both personally and professionally at that lens of like, where do my children, I have 4 young kids, where are they going to go to school? Because I can't keep moving around. So when I learned more about how we do wellness at Ken Denver, that was a huge selling point. And we have partnered wellness and athletics. We have a strategic plan in place right now where it has 5 pillars, and wellness and athletics is one of those pillars. And what I tell families all the time is that, I want, great kids here. And if you play sports at Kent Denver, innately, you're going to get the X's and the O's and the kinesiology and the body movement. You're going to get that from our coaches. You're going to get that in practice. I have faith in that. But what you're going to learn more about is that sports psychology piece, that second bucket: sleep, nutrition, mental health, wellness, the why behind all of those things. We teach a sports psych class here, and we have all kinds of really cool speakers that come in and, like, yeah, it's easy for me to say you need 8 hours of sleep, but why do I need 8 hours of sleep? And we investigated, and I think this is really cool. We changed it this year, like, the old school model of when we travel. Hockey travels a lot for us, so when hockey goes up to the mountains, 4 kids in a room trying to save the money, right? Like, you put 4 teenage boys in a hotel room, you are not waking up the next day fully rested and ready to compete at the optimal level, right? I mean, yeah, you saved $100, but you're trying to compete and win and put our kids in the best situation to be successful. So we changed that. Our policy now is that everybody has their own bed, and if possible. There's sometimes when hotels, we can't, but we're willing to put the money and the resources into that because we want you to compete at the highest level the next day. And that's not just within athletics. Our Model UN does that now, and our speech and debate teams when they travel. So that wellness component, and I think athletic directors, th- that is the new wave of what we do.
No, I love that. And thank you for sharing that. And we're going to have a much longer follow-up on that when I come out to see you. But that's fascinating. And those are things that I think are usually in the important but not urgent bucket at most of our schools and programs, right? As far as like, how do we move on the margins there? But it is secondary to all the other things that are going on. I love that you found a way to integrate that. So
And,
appreciate
and
sharing.
I'm not ignorant to the fact that I have a support system here that gives me the time to do that, right? I'm not running around with my hair on fire, scheduling games and making sure the gyms are all. We have a team here, that helps support my work in that, and I'm able to really dig deep and support our kids in a way that I wouldn't have at my old job.
Yeah, no doubt. And I am similarly blessed. And I think if we're zooming out to the 40,000 foot that we talked about, and you are at a school where you are solo, right? It's obviously putting that bucket together, what's important, what's urgent, what's on your long term, your midterm, your short term list of areas of growth and development, and you're chipping those off as you get them. Let me ask this final question, and then I'll let you get back to your day. What is something you've most recently changed your mind on? And it doesn't have to be about athletics. It's generally a growth mindset type deal, right? I used to be dug in over here, and now after further reflection and experience, I'm over here. And here's why. And I
Mhm.
always think, right, we ask our athletes to believe in us, our coaches, and things that maybe we're bringing to the table that is contradictory to their previously held beliefs, right? What are some of the ways that we are exploring our own opinions?
Yeah, well, I love that we're going to end on this. And once again, I'm going to answer it in two ways. Personally, um, I've changed my mindset on the fact I used to think that I needed an hour and a half to 2 hours every night of Jeff time, decompression, whether it's watching stupid TV or, just anything to, my kids are in bed, lights are low. Like I felt like I needed that time. And if I didn't have that time, I wasn't going to be fully functioning. I have changed my mindset to that time of that's our time. And I was short selling my wife and children because I was being selfish on saying I need this time. And I've changed that to like, no, we can do something together and I can decompress in a different way. Now I don't bat 1,000. There are some nights I'm like, all right, it's time to go to bed. I need a minute here. But really changing that idea of like cooking dinner can be decompression time, asking about their day or, teasing them. And, so that's one major thing. And another thing is I was hell bent on teacher coach model. If we want the best out of our kids, we have got to have the teachers have to be in the building. And if you're not an educator, then you're not a coach. And although I still am a firm believer, I would love to have all of our coaches in the building. I've been proven wrong. There are some really good club coaches that can have transformational relationships, can coach at a high level and give us the time that we need. And when I got here, it was every staff needs to find the right people that can fit and make it happen. They don't have to have kendenver.org next to their name.
No, and I would agree with that. We were actually talking about this yesterday with one of my assistants who's also our trainer, in that it is much more challenging to be an off-campus coach. But there's some that can pull it off.
Yep.
And there's always going to be certain things that are lacking in regards to the kids' ability to pop by your office whenever they want versus scheduled meetings. But I'm with you. Like at the end of the day, I want someone that's an expert in their space that's going to be able to build relationship and drive the boat. And, truth be told, they're not always on campus.
Yep.
But how do you support them with on-campus people, or how do you set the time for them to, cover the blind spots? Our lacrosse coach was my assistant AD for years and left to work in real estate. And the last 2 years, he's been essentially an off-campus coach. And we're navigating, okay, what's different? How are we trying to figure out so that our athletes have the same experience now that you're getting pulled in these other directions? And so it's challenging, but I think you're 100% right that it's possible.
Yep.
Well, anyway, coach, I appreciate you coming on today. Thanks for taking the time. Looking forward to seeing you and getting some more coaching when I get out there to see you.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you. Great conversation. Inspiring stuff.